which era do you feel created better music? And do you feel that traditional music composition is not as effective today as it was before in that sense?
You need to like rein in your time frame here, because remember, I'm the guy who will talk to you about music that's like 500 years old. So like, do you want to talk about the 70s or do you want to talk about Johann Sebastian Bach?
I could say like maybe within like the most like popular realm too. So like maybe within like the 1900s till like now in that sense.
So, I mean, music has taken a more and more and more important role continuously through all of that time, and the number of people making music has increased continuously through all of that time, and the modes through which it's enjoyed and distributed, and the amount of presence it has in our lives has increased over time. In the 1900s, people didn't walk around with earbuds in their ears. They didn't have headphones like this. They couldn't just listen to music on demand. They didn't have a Spotify that had a catalog of every song ever written, where they could just like say, "Hey Siri, play whatever." They couldn't do that. So if you ask me what the best era for music is, it's right now. Today, not yesterday, today, because today there are more possibilities for you than there were yesterday. And tomorrow it will be even better. So, I mean, it's very obvious that like the most music that has ever been made was made now. And it's increasing. Okay. So in terms of like music that I like the most, I like Johann Sebastian Bach. I think he was the best musician that humanity ever created, but he's been dead for 400 years or so. And we'll never have another one like that. It's impossible. And when you ask about traditional music creation, what does that even mean? Johann Sebastian Bach would hear the music in his mind, and he would write notes on a piece of paper. And hopefully these pieces of paper didn't get used to pack meat or to start fires in fireplaces or just get rained upon, so that they would survive hundreds of years until later generations and people could copy them by hand and play the pieces. But he started by imagining all the sounds in his head. Whereas people these days, when they create music, they typically open up a DAW or a mixing program or a synthesizer, something, or sampling program, and they start putting electronic things together in tracks. It's a completely different process. I think that there are very few people left on Earth who simply sit and think of music in their brain, and when they've got it the way they want it, they write it down on paper. that doesn't happen very often. That's what Kimiko Ishizaku does, but it's very rare.
Most definitely. I feel like, just even in an opinion-based sense too, like if a Johann Sebastian Bach or a Beethoven or Mozart were to like listen to like a current mainstream song right now, like let's say Anti-Hero by Taylor Swift, like I don't know like how the reactions would be. I don't know if they would prefer like the composition like from that as opposed to what they're like making like back then too, or if they would be like sort of like indifferent to it.
Well, this is a very interesting question, which we can never answer, but I used to have a fantasy quite often. It was probably one of my top 2 or 3 fantasies. Like, what would I buy if I won the lotto? What would my life be if I went back to 10 years old with all of my current knowledge and could live my life again, but knowing the future? And then number 3 was, what would it be like if Mozart just appeared in my car next to me and I could turn his symphony on the radio as we drive through a modern city? What questions would he have? The world's changed so much. What magic is this that allows a Mozart symphony to come through the speakers of a car, through the air, into the car without an orchestra being there in this car? What's a car even? Like, why the hell are we moving 100 kilometers an hour down the road? How is this possible? And like the shock and enjoyment of like introducing somebody from the past to modern life. So that was my number 3 fantasy out of all my fantasies. But like, when I really think into it, what would Taylor Swift sound like to Mozart? It would be shocking. It would be so foreign. There would be sounds that he couldn't explain, the instruments being used, and the whole the vocabulary of drums and beats, and the use of like bass and harmony is so far removed from what he was doing and what he thought was valuable and what he thought was interesting that it would probably not go over very well. It would probably not sound very much like music at all to a Mozart. I think that you have to have a certain contextual preparation to be able to absorb something that you hear. And if you don't have that contextual preparation, you can't absorb it as music. I'll give you a case in point from my history. Okay, so I mean, first of all, I grew up almost summarily rejecting pop music altogether in the 80s, even though 80s pop music is awesome. It's awesome. I love it now. But because of the context in which I grew up, which was very focused on orchestras and classical music, that wasn't even considered music. That was considered trash. And that context prevented me from enjoying 80s music for a long time. And even within the classical music, I remember when my orchestra had to play Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and some people out there might know this. It's very 20th century, early 20th century. So lots of dissonances, harsh rhythms, harsh sounds from the orchestra. Very pioneering at the time. It caused a riot when it was premiered in Paris, like a literal riot at the theater, with people heckling and shouting and throwing objects and fighting. So that's how striking it was. And when I heard it on my cassette tape, I stopped the tape. I took the tape out, I hurled it across the room and cussed at it and said, "That's not music. I can't believe I have to play that crap." But I had to play that crap, meaning I had to learn it. So I kept listening to it. And at some point, I gained enough context to listen into those sounds and gain an understanding of them. And they grew upon me to the point where Stravinsky's Rite of Spring became, at least for an entire year, my favorite music on earth. And I listened to it hundreds of times, hundreds, to the point that I was dreaming of vegetables growing through the earth and pagans running through forests based on the sounds of this music. So when I think about what a Johann Sebastian Bach would hear if he heard Taylor Swift, I don't think it would go over very well. And frankly, even if he got enough context, he still might not like Taylor Swift in the end. Let's be honest. We're talking about the greatest musician who ever walked the earth versus Taylor Swift.
Nah, I definitely agree. I think with Swift fans, like, they're probably going to be upset at that, but I do feel like it is the truth in some way too.